Okay, so I decided I'm going to start showing people how I use my analog Zettelkasten because I see a lot of people talking about how to create one, but none of them really seem that helpful to me. I'm always looking for ways I can maybe improve how I think about using my Zettelkasten and maybe pick up tips and tricks along the way. But what I find I end up doing is critiquing what other people have to offer. And I realized it's because I think I've found a way that works for me that operates with an understanding of what a Zettelkasten is that seems to be lacking in a lot of the discourse about Zettelkastens. You may have heard of a couple books that I think really made Zettelkastens well known over the past few years. And I think the two most famous ones are Antinet, which I have not read, and How to Take Smart Notes by Sonky Ahrens. Definitely not pronouncing that correctly. Now, I have read that book, and that is perhaps what initially got me interested in using a Zettelkasten. Although even there, Ahrens discusses the benefits of a digital Zettelkasten, which I'm completely opposed to. Antinet does seem to discuss an analog approach to Zettelkasten, at least in theory, but I've noticed it really takes a different approach than what Niklas Luhmann seems to have done with his Zettelkasten. Certainly the most famous proponent of using a Zettelkasten every day in the 20th century. I'm aware that there are older examples of this sort of thing. So I'll show you mine, first of all. This is what I'm currently working with. I was very fortunate to find this lovely old box at a flea market in a nearby town. And so I'm working with probably 200, 250 notes at this point. It's not a lot, but I do have a very dense amount of information in here spanning a number of topics already. And we could do the basics. I'll probably get to all of that. Of how do you create a note? How do you know what a note is? How do you name it? How do you organize it? And that sort of thing. And I think where people really seem to get tripped up is I've got 250 notes. How do I find the specific note I'm looking for when I come back later? So I can tell you, I started my Zettelkasten in August of 2020. And I know that because my first note is from a research project I was doing. I was still in law school at the time, and I was doing a project on the role of AI and technology in law and law's relationship to technology, regulation, that sort of thing, through the lens of Martin Heidegger's essay, The Question of Technology. And so my very first card is a quote from Heidegger's essay, The Question of Technology, on page 319 of my specific copy of selected writings of his that contains that essay. Now that is the only reason why that is the first card. It's not because this is the most important card. It's not because all the other cards flow from this one. This merely has number one because it was the first card. So in essence, you could look at my most highly numbered card, this is card 254, and say this is the most recent note that I have made. But that's not necessarily true either. So this is not chronological. So how do I find the notes that I'm looking for? And this is where things just are so different than any digital tool you will hear people talking about when it comes to personal knowledge management or Zettelkastens, right? And I think the thing that people miss, they skim over, they largely ignore, whether consciously or not, is PKM, personal knowledge management, has the word personal in it. So why does that matter? Well, I have a conversation with my Zettelkasten. Now, what does that mean? I'm talking to these notes. And think of it much like how you have a conversation with a friend who has, some shared interests. So I'm very interested in philosophy. I have friends that also have some interest in philosophy. When I have a conversation with them, we might start talking about one thing, and then the conversation just ebbs and flows rather organically and naturally through a variety of different topics. And that's what keeps conversation fun and keeps us on our toes, so to speak. There's no agenda for this conversation, and we don't have specific points that we have to hit. It's much like the conversation with this box. So I might go in one morning, and let's say I have a card that I want to add into the Zettelkasten. Let's say it's not really an appropriate one for YouTube. Let's see. Let's say I want to add this card in here. No, God. Give me a moment. All right. Okay, we'll go with this card. This is from Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness, I believe. And it's a quote. Appearance does not hide essence, it reveals it. It is essence. Now, let's say I was looking for this. I probably could not just go to this card if I wanted to. It's in there. I just saw it was number 107, but I'm not going to memorize that. So I would actually have to thumb through and look for it. And is that efficient? No. But I'll tell you what it is. It's very useful. Because as I'm looking for this note, I'm actually seeing all of my other notes, whether I want to or not. And that's where the connections in the conversation comes in. Now, this has connections with cards 8A, 2C2, and card 2. So let's go to 8A, first of all. Here we go. Now, this, being close to the beginning, is actually also from Heidegger's The Questioning of Technology essay. In framing, challenges fourth man to prepare himself to become standing reserve. Oh dear, you should be thinking. An appearance does not hide essence, it reveals it. It is essence. Now, if I'm absolutely honest with you, off the bat, I actually cannot describe to you the connection between these two cards. But what I can do is recognize I did notice a connection at one point. And this card from Sartre is talking about how appearance, aesthetics, is not something that hides or veils the true essence of things from us, but is actually what reveals the essence and contains a truth in and of itself. And when Heidegger's talking about enframing is actually something that operates as a sort of veil. It narrows our perspective. And so I can start thinking creatively about how I might want to connect these two cards, even though I haven't actually notated down what that connection might be. Now, that's one way in which this is an absolute treasure trove of brand new ideas. Of course, there are philosophers that are connecting Sartre and Heidegger, but this will allow me to formulate my own synthesis of these ideas completely by myself, just by saying, okay, there's a connection here. How do I want to put that into words? But then let's go to our next connection here. That's 2C2, again, near the beginning. 2C, 2C1, 2C2. And this is not from Heidegger, but related, and it's art is technology's ancient sibling. Therefore, it has this, what Heidegger calls a saving power. And now we're starting to see where these connections are all kind of coming together art being this kind of, having this, obviously aesthetic quality to it. We're talking about appearance and essence. And so if art has a saving power for technology, what does that mean for the aesthetics of technology, for how we treat the way technology appears to us, whether technology's truth resides in its technologicality, if you'll permit me to make up a word, versus, how it appears to us. And then what's brilliant still, we haven't got here yet, is each of these cards have yet more connections. So I'll take this one out, and we'll just put that here, and we'll go to number 2, which is the final connection on this Sartre card. Okay, 2A. Now this is just a note that I have made as I've been thinking through the notes in and around it. It uses some Greek terms here, so forgive me, but physis is correlated to the anatomy of self in Kierkegaard, a bringing forth subjectively or internally, whereas poiesis is Christ's involvement, a pure revealing, bringing forth logos. That's the last word I wrote there with a question mark. And so now I can actually put this here too. And this is just 4 cards that are dancing around a potential central idea, and I could probably write the whole essay just on these 4 cards. This is 3 different texts and then a card that is purely my own idea. But if I wanted to go deeper, so 2A connected to it, 171. Let's go there. So 171 is obviously a card I've made a lot later on. Even though I said it's not chronological, it vaguely is. You can kind of guarantee that, I've got these subsection identifiers. I've got 2, I've got 2A. Once you get to those subsections, I could be adding those in much later, but you can guarantee, just by pure deduction, that card 171 was made later than card number 2. So we go to card 171. This is connected to the physis and the poiesis. Seek first God's kingdom, that has become like the lily and the bird, that has become utterly silent before God, then all the rest will be added to you. That's from Kierkegaard's The Lily of the Field and the Bird of the Air. Okay, so now we're thinking about revealing and bringing forth, and how do we access truth? Is it through this physis or a physis, which I noted is correlated to the anatomy of the self in Kierkegaard, a subjective bringing forth, or this poiesis, this kind of poetic form of revealing truth that we find kind of in a pure relationship with Christ, perhaps. And that's where this is starting to connect with that. But then we could also go to 61A1, and based on the number, I already have an idea of what that might be. 61A1A. Human nature is not a fixed, timeless essence, but a creative task for each individual. So this, I think, relates to the bringing forth, in that we as humans actually have a responsibility to bring forth truth into the world. And what's lovely, again, too, is you can see the number of connections here. So you start going down these rabbit holes, and you start thinking, okay, it's a Tuesday morning, and I'm going to go through my cards, and I'm going down these lines of thought and seeing what comes out. And so you start pulling cards out, and you're putting them together, and you're tactile, and you're with them, and put those aside for a moment. What I like to do when I really have something worth writing about is I'll just take my notebook, and here's something I've been working on. It's an essay looking at Plato's allegory of the cave and comparing that to the story of Abraham and Isaac going up the Mount Moriah, for the sacrifice of Isaac, if you're familiar with that story. And so what I've got here is essentially an outline for the essay. But the way I made this is I went through my cards, and I just thought, okay, that's interesting. I think I want to write about that. And if you look here, I've got 66. So that's card 66, 7D. And so as I write down these ideas, I'm just notating which card I'm getting it from. So I can actually recreate this outline with the cards if I would like to. And if I have ideas, I start, drawing and connecting things. And eventually you'll see this is, a couple pages of outlines, and this produces, as you can imagine, a relatively lengthy essay with tons of citations, and it looks incredibly well researched because it is. The research was done ahead of time. Some of these notes, 8E, again, I made 4+ years ago, and yet I'm still able to access them and interact with them along with my most current research. And so then the task is really just writing this out in a way that I can present it for whatever format I'm writing for. And we'll cover how to write in upcoming videos, but really I just wanted to give you a snapshot. What does it look like to use an analog Zettelkasten day in and day out? Not what it is like to start one, because there's lots of videos on that. But people get stuck after the first few cards, and they're trying to connect to them, and I think people get discouraged. But what I want to show you is that you can have hundreds of cards, and it's not about being able to find the specific card that you're looking for, but it's about having the conversation with the ideas that you've collected and maintained over years and years and years. Now, why wouldn't you put this on your computer? Why wouldn't you use Obsidian or Notion or any of these programs that people like to use and make videos about and la-di-da? Well, let me tell you a story. 2009, I opened my Evernote account. I was a young boy at the time, and I was putting all my information in there, all my school notes, all of this sort of thing. From 2009 until 2016, so seven good years, that's where I stored all of my class notes. I used Penultimate, and I would write my iPad handwriting notes, and they'd automatically save, and it was lovely. But I did notice that it started to get bloated, started to get more expensive, and ultimately I fell away from it because it was not usable, it was not practical for my life anymore. But now I have thousands of notes in Evernote, and they're effectively inaccessible because I have to log on, and I have a limited number of devices because I'm not paying for it anymore, and it's not good. It's not good. And even with something like Obsidian, which, yes, it stores all of your notes in markdown files, you can access them, without using Obsidian. But to get the features that you really want, that connecting, you really need to still be using and relying upon Obsidian. So it still needs to run, still needs to be supported, and I believe you still need to pay for it. I could be wrong with that, but you are still relying on other people to maintain something in order for you to use it well. And you might be thinking, well, I can always run the program. But I say, try running a program on your computer that was built 40 years ago and not updated since. You cannot, because those programs are so rudimentary, your operating system wouldn't know what to do with them. And would you really still want to be using a program so outdated? What's fascinating about handwriting, and something that it can do that no computer program can do, is it's thousands of years old as an art form, and yet is still as relevant and modern as ever. So that's why you shouldn't be using your computer for this sort of personal knowledge management, which, as I say, it's been 4.5 years. I intend to be using the Zettelkasten for the next 40 or 50 years and beyond. I see no reason to stop using it, and it's only going to become more useful. I've written dozens of essays and articles and book chapters for unfinished books, of course, using this system. But imagine when I've got 2,500 notes, 25,000 notes, 250,000 notes. This is not unreasonable to think. And is it going to be overwhelming at that point? Is it going to be difficult to make those connections? I don't think so. I think this is a very scalable system, and I really implore you to give it a go. And I'll be doing my best to create some videos that help show some of the more detail, getting started, creating your Zettelkasten, and how I kind of use a bibliography with this so I know where my notes are coming from, and some more detail on not only how to transfer this into some sort of written product that you're working on, essay or school paper, that sort of thing, but also how to write, because I think that is an incredibly important skill that we've missed. So that's all I've got for you for now. But if you like this sort of content, stick around.